It is budget eve and it's the first Labor budget in about a decade. Australia's economy will be downgraded by a full percentage point when it comes to GDP when the budget is unveiled tomorrow. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, forecasts that growth in the next financial year will be at 1.5%, which is way down on what was forecast in March. Joining me live now is the Shadow Treasurer, Angus Taylor. Angus, thanks so much for your time. Do you think Labor and Jim Chalmers, in what we've seen so far, is being overly and deliberately pessimistic?
Oh, well, there's no doubt he's talking down the economy, but perhaps that's appropriate given that Labor doesn't have a comprehensive plan to deal with the issues that we face right now, Laura. So if you think about what the test is for Labor with this budget, it is to have a comprehensive, clear plan for dealing with the pressures we're facing, cost of living pressures in the short term, in particular inflation and interest rates, and then in the medium to longer term having a strong growth profile and at the same time keeping their election commitments, including on the tax cuts. Now, right now, all we've seen from Labor in responding to that is a set of forecasts that say they're going to put 150,000 people out of work, cost of living pressures are going to intensify, real wages are not going to improve in any material way in this election cycle, and that taxes are going to go up and spending is going to go up. Now, Laura, that is not a plan. That is putting up the white flag. That is giving up. And what we do need to see from Labor is a comprehensive, clear plan that deals with those pressures and doesn't walk away from the challenges that Australians are feeling in their households, in their businesses, right across the board.
There are lessons from the UK, surely. Governments can't be working against what central banks are trying to do. So in that vein, do you think it is actually possible to offer direct payment, cost of living relief, and also make sure that it's not inflationary?
Well, it depends what it is, Laura. Yeah. So if, for instance, it's focused on getting more pensioners into work so they've got more of an income to respond to these cost of living pressures, so they don't lose their pension if they do extra hours of work. That's a kind of cost of living relief that at the same time takes pressure off inflation and interest rates. And that's a sensible policy. You know, we announced that was our position some time back. Labor's going with a very half-baked version of that. But they're the sorts of measures that can really make a difference. Measures that have the double outcome of improving people's cost of living, ability to deal with a rising cost of living, and at the same time strengthening the economy. They're the sorts of measures we should be seeing. But we're not. What we're seeing is doom and gloom, a lot of commentary, a lot of forecasting, telling us how they're going to make things worse. Look, Tony Burke before the election said you're going to see in your bank account the effect of this new government. Well, he was right about that. That's an election commitment they're keeping. People are going to be worse off as a result of a Labor government. Labor makes you poorer, and that is very clear from what we're seeing from the forecasts coming out from Labor. They really are putting up the white flag. They're giving up on dealing with these pressures.
Well, look, every taxpayer dollar is precious. It should be spent that way. Do you admit there was waste in some of your government's grants programs?
Look, when you look back and you look at the COVID era, there's always things you will look at and say, could we have done that better? But the truth of the matter is the economy is in extraordinary shape. 3.9% growth is what we left Labor with. They're going to take
Isn't
it
that
down
thanks to commodities,
to 1.5, they tell us today. We saw extraordinary low unemployment. I mean, you've got a position here, Laura, where Labor has inherited a remarkably strong economy, and all they're telling us is they're going to take it over a cliff. They've got to do better than that, and that's the disappointment in what we're seeing so far. I hope on Tuesday we're going to see a much better outcome than that. You ask about the budget. I mean, we do want to see a responsible budget. We do want to make sure that we see a responsible way forward. But the $2.2 billion outer suburban rail loop in Melbourne, that's not responsible. Doesn't pass the cost-benefit analysis, not recommended by Infrastructure Australia, condemned by the Auditor General in Victoria. These are not the sort of projects that make sense.
A bit like commuter car parks, I would say. But Angus Taylor, you say, you're taking a lot of credit for the state you left the budget in, but aren't you taking credit where essentially It's coal and commodities.
No, it's a lot more than that. I mean, the turnaround in the budget is quite remarkable, $50 billion improvement in the last financial year. Now, you know, to point out how remarkable that is, the entire budget last financial year was in the first 4 months. The entire deficit was in the first 4 months when New South Wales and Victoria were in lockdowns. Once we came out of lockdown, the budget was back in a balanced position, and you know that is a remarkable outcome.
But it was all
what we're
revenue
seeing
side.
from Labor, though, is a plan to take it over.
Back on heaps of spending, though, did you?
Well, but the point was we had the right policies for the time, which was coming out of COVID, making sure that people were in work, that we had 4 million jobs that would have been lost that weren't lost, 1 million businesses that would have gone under that didn't go under. We had the right policies to make sure that the economy could come out with strength. Now the challenge being faced is cost of living pressures and longer term growth, and we're not seeing a plan to deal with that. And that's the disappointment, Laura. You know, what this government hasn't learnt yet is you've got to respond quickly to the circumstances as they change. They're always changing. You can't just sit there and give commentary and forecasting. You have to respond. You have to deal with those pressures. There's nothing we're seeing so far that is dealing in a comprehensive way with those pressures. They're putting up the white flag, they're driving the economy off a cliff, and that's incredibly disappointing given the strength of what they inherited.
Okay, enter stage 3 tax cuts. We're not going to see any change in this budget, but I do feel like Labor is still kind of charting this path towards winding them back at some stage during this term. You see the cost of them apparently has got more expensive. Are there any circumstances in which you would see that it would be inappropriate to go ahead with those stage 3 tax cuts, or are you committed to these come hell or high water?
Well, we're absolutely committed to them. The point about the stage 3 tax cuts, the starting point is both sides of politics went to the election with that as a commitment, and an ironclad commitment. From Labor, no footnotes, no asterisks. It was, as they said, an ironclad commitment. Now, we know they're looking for an excuse to walk away from. Any excuse will do. It turns out, fortuitously, that the timing looks very, very good at the moment, which is we need to have a pro-growth agenda as we move on from these inflationary pressures. The expectation is that the inflationary pressures will reduce over the coming years, less than we would have liked, but nonetheless. Yep. And so then the key is growth. And, telling Australians that they can be confident, without all these reservations we're seeing right now from Labor, that they can keep 70 cents in the dollar despite inflation, despite bracket creep, which drives up the average tax rate for Australians. Despite all those things, we're going to take that away and give them 70 cents in the dollar. It's theirs so they can build their careers, take risks, invest, all of those things we need for growth. That is so important, and that message should be coming from the government with conviction. Okay. And that will underpin our ability to come through with strong growth, not the forecasts we've seen today or projections we've seen today from Labor, which says they're actually going to slow the growth of the economy very, very sharply. This is how you deal with it, Laura, and having some passion and conviction behind it from Labor will help people to see that despite some of the challenges we're facing, investment, building careers, taking risks, all makes sense. And, it's the private sector and activity in the private sector that will get us through these challenges. And Labor needs to enable that and facilitate that. Whilst Jim Chalmers is saying he doesn't like these stage 3 tax cuts, and it's very clear he doesn't like them. I mean, there's no ambiguity about that. He said that before the election, and he's been echoing that more recently. Whilst that remains, we're not going to take advantage of them, and we will see slower growth.
Okay, look forward to analysing or seeing your reaction to this first budget on Wednesday. Before I let you go, you mentioned the private sector. The private sector must be scratching their head at the moment thinking, ooh, should we or shouldn't we sponsor sporting teams around the country? This seems like a new trend. What's your take on it?
Oh, let sport be sport. I mean, I love my sport. I really do. I participate still. I was playing Golden Oldies rugby on the weekend. I mean, it's something Australians love. Country towns like where I live, it's almost fanatical, the focus on sport. Let sport be sport. I mean, let's keep politics out of it as much as we possibly can, and let's enjoy sport for what it is. That is a great Australian tradition. Let's keep it that way.
Angus Taylor, we'll speak to you soon. Thanks so much.